Sonic Boom Episode 20, Battle of the Boy Bands. I hate the word band being in there. Is this going to be painfully unfunny? Because, based on the title, this is going to be one of the top 2 worst episodes in the show, isn't it? A news reporter says that an epidemic is spreading across the globe. Ugh. Instead he's talking about Justin Bieber. I always called the guy that, even as a teenager, even in the face of being corrected. Styx snarks that pop singers force people to abide by the man for some reason. It'd be nice if she elaborated on that, to be more relatable. And Sonic snarks that it's a marketing ploy to sell bad music to teenage girls. Then we see Amy be really happy about the music, because she's a girl, so the writer thinks they have to. And she's excited because one of the songs says that he's actually talking about the audience. Sonic and Knuckles arbitrarily turn off the radio on Amy, even though he was actually a good singer. The only problem was that it's a love song. Those are overdone. But seriously, it's so sexist that Amy's like this just because she's the girl character. Thank God Styx doesn't like this. Then it'd be completely unforgivable. Usually Amy's not feminine, aside from her red dress, because she's got a bad temper and she has a hammer and chases after Sonic. What's she doing in this position? You'd think that if anything, she'd be the sassy one complaining about this. It'd just be another way that she's weird and stands out. Amy then gets excited about the fact that Justin will be performing a concert, but sadly, Styx gets just as excited about him and screams just as much. Sonic fortunately lampshades Styx getting excited and wants to investigate, because I was just wondering if I was jumping the gun and calling the writer sexist, only to be upset when I saw that even Styx cared. Justin robotically says that this is the only fan he cares about to multiple people. So is the twist that he's a robot? I heard about Justin Bieber being in the show before I even watched the show. I always assumed this guy was a robot. Sonic's arbitrarily suspicious of him, as if this is the first time a pop singer sensation has ever existed on his planet. Sonic then decides to form a boy band of all things. Sonic the Hedgehog deciding to form a boy band. And Knuckles lampshades this embarrassment, while Tails asks him why he brought them all the way down to their house just to say this. This is an embarrassment to the Sonic franchise. Why did they waste time making an episode about a pop culture thing just to say they were relevant? We don't need Sonic to be relevant. We watch Sonic to escape from reality. Don't we want it to be as unlike the real world as possible? Didn't people make fun of Sonic 06 because what if Sonic was in the real world? At least there's cool guitar music in the boring montage where the heroes are trying to write songs. Music like that reminded me of the background music of Sonic Underground. But this show is way too lame to be compared to that. Which, at least can be cool. It's just that the main cast had bad voices. But I'd take bad voices over this! Sonic would never humiliate himself like this. Sonic was supposed to be cool. That was the whole appeal to his character. Like, that was the reason the franchise was successful. Fortunately, when they all humiliate themselves by dancing awkwardly and saying the words "bah" over and over, make me wish the show got cancelled before this episode because it's so cringeworthy. They actually get allowed to progress past the bodyguard. Couldn't Sonic have just run past them? Then the heroes spy on people who are bragging about their mind control plan, even though they both already know it by heart. Fortunately, we hear a Benny Hill-themed parody for a little while after they run around, but it ends too quickly, with barely anything happening. Amy and Styx don't believe Knuckles, and Knuckles actually lampshades how lazy the writing was, literally saying so in a shitty fourth wall break. If the writer knows how lazy the writing was, he should have been fired for going on with it anyways. You don't do that. We really didn't need to see them wearing those white clothes. Sonic's supposed to be cool, and so is Knuckles. Anyways, Tails is asked if his measurometer has installed a counter frequency, and Sonic lampshades the stupidity of his name. Then I painfully skip past every single bit of the worthless singing. Sonic Underground is officially better than this show in every way. At least in that show, you always knew when the songs were going on and when they would stop, because the screen looked different, like it letterboxed or widescreened, or had some effects on it, like it was black and white. It's hard to describe, but the point is, it didn't just look like the characters were playing music and singing during the actual plot that was actually worth watching. It was more like they entered into another universe that was detached from the plot entirely. So it was easy for me to pause the video and skip ahead on the YouTube timeline to look at the preview boxes and determine this is when I should skip to. I obviously couldn't do that for this worthless garbage because I downloaded the video this time. So I had no preview boxes, and didn't know that it wouldn't end. The bottom line is, Tales somehow plays music to brainwash people out of being brainwashed, all the while with the show and franchise humiliating itself by marketing purely to 3-year-olds. The only ones who wouldn't immediately start skipping ahead from the cringiness, or change the channel. Well, I say this as someone who hates and skips past any time characters start singing. At least here it was justified by the story instead of being completely arbitrary, like Sonic Underground or some other musical. But there was one really horrible part where someone held a note while singing badly. At least the villains were people other than Eggman. But how the fuck could anyone other than Eggman make mind control happen? And if that's the kind of thing that can happen that easily, why isn't it already really common? Why isn't a dictator already taking control of everything? I just have to assume that the person who made the mind control stuff was a wizard who used the magic spell to do it. But even then, why use the magic spell for a pop singer of all things instead of an amulet that could be conveniently worn whenever you want? It was really embarrassing to the Sonic franchise that they felt the need to write an episode about a real-life celebrity, when the whole appeal of the series, which is sci-fi fantasy after all, is to escape reality. This is by a detached writer who doesn't care about the fact that he's writing for Sonic. At least when Archie Sonic referenced real-life celebrities, it was just pointless little lines of dialogue, not an entire episode of nothingness. Fortunately, there was at least some point to it because there was a sinister twist, and Eggman wasn't even involved for once. But it goes without saying that the episode humiliated Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, making them do something they'd normally never do. This has no credibility at all. If the whole point of Sonic's character, even in this show, is to be cool, why would he do this when even he doesn't respect the idea? This is out of character. Archie did the concept of a pop singer way better with Mina. It was completely harmless there. Normally, when Sonic Boom has a good episode, I really like it. And when it has a bad one, I'm just bored. But it's not outright aggravating like AOSCH's bad episodes, which were usually just horrible. So the show comes off as the best one in Sonic because it's either good or dull but doesn't have nearly as many problems as the other shows. But this was aggravating. This was just mind-bogglingly stupid and embarrassing to the series. You know it's bad when you're too embarrassed to watch it. I wouldn't want to be caught watching these characters sing. I would pause the video if someone walked in. I don't even care whether they sound good or not. It's the principle of the thing. I'd rather watch any episode of Sonic Underground than this, because at least the parts that weren't the songs were worth watching. There was roboticization, Robotropolis, magical amulets giving the heroes elemental powers, all that engaging stuff. There was genuine tension and struggle every episode against Eggman the Tyrant instead of nothing actually mattering. Sure, they never find their mother or take down Robotnik, but this show is really pointless, because Eggman's not even accomplishing anything, and the heroes spend most of their time just goofing off. In Underground, there was an interesting divide between the rich and poor people, unique main characters to have another original hook that actually got me to like them, and action scenes with badass music and creative ways of fighting. You'd have to be really stupid to dismiss all of those good things as worthless. Look at what we have to compare it to. This episode didn't have anything like that. This episode just wasn't worth watching at all. I hope it was as unpopular with the fans as it was with me. When it comes to the good episodes, I'm like, no, the show's really creative and charming. I love the Sonic series. I love seeing new plots. Why did I think I would hate the show for not being epic? This wasn't such a big deal. It's boring, but it's not horrible. But when it comes to episodes this bad, I look at it and I admire the people who are smart enough to hate the show because of silly stuff like this. Because this kind of embarrassingly stupid stuff is not something to be encouraged, regardless of what the characters look like. It's the opposite of what's good about the show. It's symbolic of what the franchise devolved into after 06. Because they tried too hard to go in the other extreme, and ended up having the worst marketing they've had in the entire history of the franchise. Look at how much brand confusion Sonic Boom caused. Aside from Tails, Orba, and Cubot, all of the main characters are out of character. Knuckles and Amy are unrecognizable, and most of the series isn't anything like this. How confused and misaimed are the young fans that are brought to the series by Sonic Boom, where the characters in main setting are off? They're gonna go on to the heights of the series like Sadie M and Archie and Sonic the Comic, and won't get what's good and right about them because they think the series is supposed to be like this. It's so backwards. At least in Archie, the game characters are in character. I think that's 10 times more frustrating than the classic fans. At least they grew up when Sadie M and stuff was on, so some of them understand what the series was best at, and some of the classic games were worth the hype. But the fans from the latest of Sonic? Look at what they're coming into. There's not much to be hyped about with modern Sonic. That's why I took a break from the games to experience everything else, just for me to come back to it with this. I didn't watch Sadie M or read Archie until after Sonic Boom was a thing, and I'm glad I was open-minded enough to appreciate it, even though I didn't grow up with anything but the games. But not everyone's like that. Not every new fan is going to go back to earlier in Sonic's history in the first place, let alone appreciate the unique stuff it has to offer. So they might end up just writing off the series as just a kid's thing and never go back to anything good. Those kinds of fans would outgrow the series pretty quickly because all they would have to look at is this. You know the episode sucks when it makes me rant this much. This episode makes AOSCH look fantastic, and normally that's Sonic X's job. Cause when AOSCH is good, it's really good, and looks gutsy compared to this. It's embarrassing just to look at these poor characters dressed like this. Granted, they could look a lot more embarrassing. They could be dressed like bananas. And I don't remember them singing horribly. But if you could make an all-encompassing list of everything Sonic as a character wouldn't do, regardless of continuity, Join a Boy Band would be really high on that list. It could have been a lot more cringeworthy though. I take boy bands over generic rap music any day. It was very merciful of the show, because if they're trying to be relevant, well, I don't see how boy bands are still relevant, let alone nearly as relevant as rappers. But they're clearly trying to be relevant since they reference a real-life celebrity. At least when Amy turned on the radio, the singing sounded great to me. And this is coming from a metal fan. Real pop music would sound auto-tuned as hell, but I remember this sounding like actual singing. So while she was being way too excited about the music, at least I could understand where she was coming from. Thank God they had mind control to explain why they're getting so excited, because that was out of character for Styx. And Amy, because in Fleetway, she hated the pop singing concert. Is the plot supposed to be that only the teenage girls are getting mind controlled? Because that's a pretty shitty and arbitrary and useless mind control technique to only affect teenage girls. We really didn't need to have an episode about Justin Bieber in the Sonic franchise. Not even a fan fiction would do that. Another thing is that the parody is really weak because they could have named that guy anything and had it be just as relevant. Because from what I heard, this Bieber is acting nothing like the real guy. My grandmother actually met the real guy in the city, and she was called an old hag. I forget whether she almost drove into him or he almost drove into her, but it's probably the former. I think the episode was too scared of being sued for libel to accurately portray their parody of him. So what was the point of naming him that? He was just named that as a lazy joke at the last second. That's really lame. You'd expect him to be much more like him. Sonic Boom episode 20-2, Tails' Crush. We start out with Sonic planning to make Knuckles try to give him a ride across the desert. Apparently he'll agree to anything, so he gets hit by cacti, and Sonic brings him through a valley of broken glass. What's that doing there? He has to have put that there on purpose. Logically that would seriously hurt Knuckles, and ruin Sonic's reputation. And somehow Tails is distracted instead of horrified with him. It has to be that the heroes have rings protecting them every single time they get slapstick that logically should kill them. Eggman yells at someone for red tape bureaucracy, saying that he just signed for something. I was satisfied when his robot grabbed the idiot for wasting his time with a simple policy. Why doesn't this happen every time? He says that this won't get his package any sooner, but logically you'd think everyone would just refuse to give him packages, and they just get mysteriously lost in the mail. Why does he even trust mail? Why doesn't he assume he'll get bombs in his mail or his dumpster? Sonic fails at first because Tails is distracted. Well, I do like the idea of him being an absent-minded genius if it's not forced. So he falls and the heroes send his badniks away. Eggman says he'll be back with a note, and Sonic lampshades Tails missing a cue. Tails has a creepy smile and is all awkward and bashful because of a girl with a long red dress named Zoe, so at least they explained him missing a cue instead of it happening for no reason. And it's a show being surprisingly impressively gutsy because Tails actually has a love interest. Amy thinks it's adorable, and Tails really is adorable when he says he's not and is serious and formidable. It was also sweet that Amy and Stick said, "Aw, he should always be like this." Sonic tells Tails to play it cool with girls, and when talking to women, be sarcastic and have a one-liner always ready. But wouldn't that bother and offend people? That would be him acting like Sonic, not himself. And Sonic doesn't have a girlfriend, so why would he ever think that he has any legitimate advice on the ladies? If he really cared about the ladies, why doesn't he have a girlfriend already? I guess because he's way too picky. And for some reason he got Comedy Chimp to agree to dress up like a woman, as Sonic tries way too hard to be cool and just embarrasses himself. The way he's acting, he reminds me of why I hated this voice for Sonic so much. He's literally like a college dude bro. That's never been Sonic. Like when he had that cathartic rant about how everyone was gasping at him earlier, I was kind of off-put at the end of his rant because I wasn't used to hearing Sonic so angry, and it really didn't help because I hated Roger Craig Smith's voice as Sonic. Although Sonic's never really had a good voice, let's be fair. It's especially off-putting when it's Roger Craig Smith's Sonic voice being especially angry. Anyways, after that cringe-worthy scene, we see another cringe-worthy scene, as Tails says he doesn't care and is busy, and uses awkward slang. She at least is just as nice to him as before, and walks away. She looks like a bad OC from DeviantArt. She shouldn't be so uniformly yellow. She needs something to break up the yellow. Her hair's too long and I can't tell what species she's meant to be. That's a bad OC design. Anyways, Knuckles lifts weights in front of Tails and impresses some girls as he has a good friend moment with him by trying to give him advice. It's so awkward to see Tails trying too hard to be cool in front of Zoe by not acting like himself. He's trying to talk like he's a tough guy, and so he's at least being polite. Tails is really happy about getting a pencil to go with his notebook. She doesn't have a personality here aside from being really polite instead of rude or judgmental every opportunity. Which is a personality, but she doesn't talk enough to make an impression. What's the point? Fiona had more of a personality. Cosmo had way more of a personality. And Sonic X Tails wasn't this try-hard when he was trying to impress a girl. In fact, he never really tried to get Cosmo to be his girlfriend, apparently, which was much less believable than this, actually. Amy reminds Tails angrily that she's a woman, as the writers never want you to forget. So she watches a movie with Tails, getting super sappy about it, and Tails awkwardly wears a Phantom of the Opera mask, and compliments Zoe from outside her window. He'd never do this. Somehow he makes the mistake of saying she smells. She then closes the window in alarm when he says that looking into her eyes is like looking into a pair of eyes. At least she's not being mean. I guess she closed the windows because she felt sorry for him and didn't want him to embarrass himself even more. Then he waves some feathers in front of her and she sneezes overly cutely. Then Eggman says that he can't watch this anymore. Thanks for being a great audience surrogate, but if the writer knew this was cringeworthy, he shouldn't have wasted so much time with it on us. So Eggman tells Tails to just be himself already and stop embarrassing himself. And he gets a new background music generator. Why on earth did he not make one himself instead of taking forever to get one delivered? And why didn't he have one a long time ago? So he makes music play while he sends badniks out. His giant robot grabs Zoe, and Tails flies on his plane and circles the robot, making it spin around as she screams for help helplessly. Sheesh, at least Fiona did stuff in the fights. He shoots it with his laser and rescues her with a yellow rope he somehow has, which conveniently ended up with her on the plane because he somehow swung her all the way up to it. It didn't look like the rope bent in the right way for that. She hugs and kisses him, saying he was amazing. I'm proud of him, and Eggman uncharacteristically plays romantic music for them. By the way, I know for a fact that in at least one later episode, I think it's episode 68, Zoe's mentioned again as someone Tails talks to a lot. So while normally I'd just be cynical about this because I'd assumed she'd just be a one-off character, making this whole plot pointless, I can actually be really proud of the show here. It's not like she just a one-episode thing and completely vanishes afterwards. She does stick around. She doesn't end up hating Tails or anything. The problem is, just like Cosmo, Zoe's not showing any proof that she's a genius either. She's not into engineering and science, as far as we know. She better be. But so far, all we know about her is that she's ridiculously nice and polite. I'm proud of the writers for not creating cheap drama every chance they got by making her ridicule Tails or look at him funny. And instead they went out of their way to subvert that. This is the first time Tails has had a love interest that hasn't had forced, arbitrary drama around her. That's the perks of being a lighthearted show for once. And to be fair, we haven't seen proof so far that she isn't interested in science, and therefore a mediocre love interest. It's not like with Cosmo, where we had 2 entire scenes where Tails was talking about engineering, and Cosmo was either totally ignoring him to focus on her angsting, or was completely confused and had no idea what he was talking about, which prompted him to apologize for geeking out on her. If I saw that again, I'd really be mad. The ideal girlfriend for Tails would be one who'd understand his science talk and be just as interested in it as him, or at least wouldn't be confused and bored by it and insisting on him changing the subject. So part of why Zoe works is that we don't see her being compatible with him. Not yet, anyway. So far, he got lucky. So lucky that the writer had the guts to not only include shipping when fans bitch about it, but actually had Zoe kiss Tails. That was easy. He didn't even tell her he loved her yet. And I'm willing to bet that she'll be an extremely rare character, making this episode mostly pointless. I mean, it would be really bad for Sonic and his friends if Zoe was constantly distracting Tails in their missions by being there. She's better off not being in the battle, so she wouldn't constantly endanger herself being a damsel in distress by being there. And she can't hang out with Tails when he's with all his friends because, well, normally Eggman attacks when he's with his friends, and they never know when he's gonna attack, so she will be attacked, and because ideally she'd be kissing him when she's around them. And they wouldn't want that because it'd be a big distraction for them, and he wouldn't be talking to them, so it'd just make things awkward and ruin everything. So I'm gonna assume that while he does hang out with her from now on, the way he'll do so is by going on dates with her apart from his friends. And naturally that he kept off screen since it'd be pointless and repetitive to show it. But at that point it's pretty pointless to have him have a love interest if you're never going to have her show him affection on screen to have sweet moments, because that would add heart to the show. But no, instead they rather pad things out with unfunny jokes. Basically this episode was about Tails awkwardly wasting her time making us cringe at how he's trying to be cool to impress Zoe. So most of it actually sucked. The idea was really respectable. It could have been a fantastic episode, but instead it was just cringeworthy. I wish Eggman told him to be himself a lot earlier, but I do respect the fact that they had the guts to give Tails a genuine love interest. It was the writer doing what he wanted instead of just catering to the angry, hateful fans who complain way too easily. And she won't get spitefully killed off this time. So it's trying to make up for Cosmo by doing it right this time. Finally giving us a continuity where Tails has a girlfriend and gets the happy ending you'd expect. She's not angsty with a tragic backstory she's constantly reminding us of. And she won't get killed off in a confusing mess of plot holes. And she also won't be completely derailed as a character. The problem is, she barely says anything. I think that an episode dedicated to her would be about showing off her personality, which would be a much better use of the episode's time. But the only thing we know about her is that she's ridiculously nice and friendly. I can appreciate that in a village full of assholes, but I'd like to know if she's interested in engineering, or something. I expected better than this. Cosmo was way more of a deep character than her, being Sally without the tsundere, and she had a much better design. This looks like a bad OC from DeviantArt. What species is she? Why doesn't she have a red headband or something to break up the yellow? That's not a very memorable design. Her hair and the fur on her face mashed together when I try to remember her. I love her dress, but I don't even know how old she is. I assumed she was a teenager because of that dress, but then she gets shipped with Tails.